By every visible metric, Chris Hemsworth should be untouchable. Global recognition, physical presence that casting directors spend careers searching for, genuine comedic timing, documented dramatic range, a fan base measured in the hundreds of millions. The ingredients are perfect. The math doesn't add up. Because the same system that made him one of the most recognizable faces on Earth also made him one of the most difficult actors in Hollywood to cast. That is not a contradiction. It is a mechanism. A specific, repeatable industrial process that the entertainment business runs on and rarely acknowledges publicly. Chris Hemsworth is not a cautionary tale about one actor's career. He is the most visible proof yet that the machinery Hollywood uses to manufacture stars contains a flaw it has never been designed to fix. Before the hammer. There is a version of Chris Hemsworth's career that most people have completely forgotten exists. In 2009, he appeared in 11 minutes of Star Trek and somehow made those 11 minutes count. He played George Kirk, a man who dies saving his crew. And in that brief window, he did something genuinely difficult. He made a stranger's sacrifice feel personal. The audience grieved someone they had just met. That is a specific, rare skill. Then came Rush in 2013. Ron Howard's Formula One drama gave him the most demanding role of his career, James Hunt, a man simultaneously magnetic and self-destructive, brilliant and completely aware of his own recklessness. Hemsworth didn't just hold the screen, he owned it. Critics noticed. The conversation quietly began about what kind of career this man could build. He had momentum, the kind that comes not from marketing, but from actual performance. And he had hunger. Watch his interviews from that period and you can feel it. He wasn't talking about Thor, he was talking about characters, about stories, and the kind of actor he wanted to become over the next 30 years. That version of Chris Hemsworth was absolutely real. He didn't disappear because the talent ran out. He disappeared because something far more powerful than talent entered the equation, and it came with a very large check. The Golden Handcuffs. Let's talk about what a Marvel contract actually means. When Disney signs a lead actor to a multi-picture MCU deal, they are acquiring a human being's public identity for the duration of that contract, and realistically, well beyond it. Your face becomes their asset. Your name becomes their marketing. Your entire public presence gets folded into a machine that has its own momentum, its own schedule, and priorities, none of which has anything to do with your growth as an actor. For most people offered that deal, the answer is obvious. You say yes. The money is generational. The global exposure is unparalleled. The security is real. Chris Hemsworth said yes in 2010, and on every practical level, it was the right decision. Thor debuted in 2011. The Avengers followed in 2012. Suddenly, Hemsworth wasn't a promising dramatic actor with momentum. He was one of the 6 faces of the highest-grossing franchise in the history of cinema. Hundreds of millions of people around the world didn't know his name. They knew his character. They knew the hammer. They knew the cape. And here is where the mechanism begins to reveal itself. Because that level of franchise saturation doesn't just raise your profile, it quietly, systematically begins to replace your identity. The audience stops seeing Chris Hemsworth playing Thor. They start seeing Thor being played by someone who looks exactly like Chris Hemsworth. The character consumes the actor. By the time he had appeared in 8 Marvel productions, the handcuffs weren't golden anymore. They were just handcuffs. The contract had delivered everything it promised: money, fame, global reach. But the cost buried in the fine print was something no entertainment lawyer thinks to negotiate. It cost him ambiguity. And in this industry, ambiguity is everything. It is the space inside which an actor becomes surprising, unpredictable, castable in things nobody has thought of yet. Once the audience has decided who you are, that space closes. Marvel closed it completely. The range problem. Here is where the theory stops being abstract and starts leaving evidence. Between Marvel appearances, Hemsworth made his moves. He chose projects deliberately. different genres, different tones, and different directors. By any reasonable standard, he was doing exactly what an ambitious actor is supposed to do, using the window between franchise obligations to prove there was more underneath the surface. The audience didn't care. Black Hat came first. Michael Mann, one of the most respected directors in Hollywood, a genuinely intelligent thriller with real technical ambition. It made $30 million worldwide against a $100 million budget. Critics were lukewarm. Audiences stayed home entirely. The conversation lasted about 2 weeks. Then, in the heart of the sea, Ron Howard again, the same director who had drawn that remarkable performance out of him in Rush, a visceral, visually stunning survival story based on the real events that inspired Moby Dick. It should have been a prestigious moment. Instead, it grossed $50 million against a $90 million budget and disappeared so quickly it barely registered as a cultural event. Men in Black International arrived in 2019 and confirmed something the industry had been quietly noting for years. Audiences were not refusing these films because they were bad. Some of them were genuinely good. Audiences were refusing them because the person at the center didn't compute outside a specific context. They showed up when he was Thor. They stayed home when he was anyone else. Spiderhead, on Netflix in 2022, added a streaming dimension to the same pattern. A high-concept thriller with a strong cast and a competent director. It arrived, generated mild curiosity, and faded within days. And this is the cruelest part of the range problem. It has nothing to do with ability. Watch Hemsworth in any of these films with genuine attention, and the talent is visible. The commitment is real. He is not coasting, he is working. But talent is only half the equation. The other half is permission. And permission lives entirely inside the audience's imagination. The extraction paradox. Then came the moment that looked, on the surface, like a breakthrough. 2020. Global pandemic. Every theater on Earth is locked shut. Netflix drops Extraction, a propulsive, brutally efficient action film starring Chris Hemsworth as Tyler Rake, a broken mercenary with a death wish and nothing left to lose. Within 4 weeks, it becomes the most watched film in Netflix history at that point. 99 million households. The numbers are staggering. The headlines write themselves. Hemsworth breaks free. A new franchise is born. The range problem is solved. Except it wasn't. Not even close. Look carefully at what Extraction actually gave him. Tyler Rake is a physically dominant, emotionally damaged, nearly indestructible man who operates outside normal human boundaries and sacrifices himself for someone he barely knows. Now describe Thor. The costumes are different. The mythology is different. The color palette is different. But the psychological architecture of both characters is almost identical. Hemsworth hadn't escaped the Thor template. He had relocated it. Stripped it of the cape, removed the hammer, dressed it in tactical gear, and the audience responded enthusiastically because it felt familiar in all the ways that mattered. The prison had new wallpaper. It was still a prison. And then Netflix did exactly what Marvel had done a decade earlier. They greenlit a sequel, then mapped out a franchise, because the numbers justified it and the business logic was undeniable. So Hemsworth signed on again. The tragedy of the Extraction paradox is not that he made the wrong decision. Given everything, the post-pandemic landscape, the collapsed theatrical market, the absence of other viable options, it was probably the most defensible decision available to him. The tragedy is that his biggest victory outside Marvel quietly confirmed the exact limitation Marvel had created. He proved he could carry a franchise. He needed to prove he could carry a story. The Taika Effect. In 2017, something genuinely exciting happened to this franchise. Taika Waititi arrived, and he did what great directors do. He found the human being inside the mythology. Ragnarok was loose, irreverent, genuinely funny, and surprisingly moving in its quieter moments. It gave Hemsworth permission to be comedic in a way the previous Thor films had never allowed. The audience responded with something close to euphoria. Critics called it a reinvention. Fans called it the best Thor film by a significant distance. And it was. On its own terms, Ragnarok is a genuinely excellent piece of popular cinema. but it created a problem nobody was talking about. Because when Love and Thunder arrived in 2022, Waititi leaned further into the comedy, and the whole thing collapsed under its own weight. What had felt fresh and liberating in Ragnarok felt chaotic and weightless in its sequel. The dramatic stakes evaporated, the emotional core went missing, and Hemsworth, fully committed to the comedic register Waititi had unlocked in him, had nowhere to land when the film needed genuine gravity. The audience noticed. The reviews were the worst of his Marvel tenure. The box office underperformed relative to expectations. But the damage that mattered most wasn't at the box office. It was in the industry's imagination. Because now, when studio executives and casting directors picture Chris Hemsworth, the comedic Thor, the bumbling, self-unaware god of Ragnarok and Love and Thunder, sits at the front of that mental image. Not the raw, dramatic presence of Rush, not the quiet devastation of those 11 minutes in Star Trek. Taika Waititi gave him his most purely enjoyable screen persona, and in doing so, accidentally completed what Marvel had started. The cost of the cape. So where does that leave him right now? Not finished. That needs to be said clearly and without qualification. Chris Hemsworth is 42 years old, in the physical condition of a man 20 years younger, and possesses genuine talent that has never been given the conditions it needs to breathe. The raw material is intact. Nothing that has happened to his career is irreversible in the way that some careers genuinely are. But leverage is a different conversation entirely. Leverage is what happens before the camera rolls. It lives in the room where projects get greenlit, where budgets get approved, and where directors make their first call when a role needs filling. And in those rooms, the ones that actually determine the shape of a career, Hemsworth's position in 2026 is complicated in ways his global recognizability completely obscures. Because recognizability and castability are not the same thing. Every human being on Earth knows his face, but knowing a face and reaching for it when a specific role needs filling are two entirely different impulses. The directors making the most culturally significant films of this moment are not making their first call to the man the world associates with a magical hammer and an increasingly comedic Viking. That is the real cost of the cape. The cost is the narrowing of the imagination. Other people's imagination about what you are capable of, which in this industry is the only imagination that opens doors. He remains one of the most famous human beings alive. He remains genuinely, measurably difficult to cast outside a very specific type of story. Both of those things are true simultaneously. And the distance between those two realities, that gap between how visible he is and how limited his options actually are, is precisely the size of the cage Marvel built around him. The Hemsworth situation did not produce a single uncomfortable boardroom conversation in Hollywood. No contracts were restructured, no casting strategies were reconsidered, no studio executive looked at what happened and decided the system needed adjusting. Because from the industry's perspective, nothing went wrong. The machine performed exactly as designed. It manufactured global recognition at scale and delivered consistent returns. That it quietly consumed an actor's range and castability in the process is simply not a variable the model is built to measure. The same contracts are being signed today. The same trajectory is already in motion for names the audience currently trusts without reservation. The system doesn't repeat itself loudly. It repeats itself in the fine print.